Okay.
All right, so first off, Kimberly, shut up.
No.
Yes. So we're going to talk about insulation a little bit in the context of building inside of your school bus. As most of us already presumably know, the school bus is comprised of a steel shell going around the entirety of it. Steel is a very good conductor of heat. Not as good as some, but way better than most. And when you have temperatures outside that you don't want to mirror inside, you need insulation. Insulation slows down the passage of heat or cool coming in and entering into your space. It doesn't stop it, but it will slow it down enough, hopefully, that you can manage it with a heater or an air conditioner. Heat rises, and so you will get most of your heat that you're creating will escape through the roof, and cold sinks. So you'll get most of your cold coming roof down. But anywhere that's metal can radiate heat that is conducted from any place where the metal is connected to the outside. You have your shell, you have ribs that go through, and then you have your inner shell, the inner skins that are all attached, and it's metal all the way through. And everywhere you have that metal, it's going to be conducting through the ribs into your living area. So insulation is very important if you find yourself at either extreme of temperature, or even just a little cold or a little hot. It'll make a big difference. There are a couple of popular types of insulation, and we're going to go over the major ones. The first one we'll talk about is the insulation that is already in your school bus, which Austin here is dealing with. Usually that insulation is a little bit of fiberglass like what you would find in the attic, but it's a very small amount, and that space is not an appropriate place for that insulation. When you look at the insulation at the hardware store and it says R18, the R value is its insulation factor. The bigger the R value, the better it is at insulating. But that number requires that it be installed a certain way into a certain space. The R18 that you see at Home Depot is for a 4-inch wall. And it expects that it's put into that space, and you get about 2 inches are taken up by the insulation itself, 2 inches of air. That air is a critical component in that R value, and if you don't have it, such as if you're in a 1 5/8 metal gap, you're not going to get anywhere close to the R value that's on the sticker. Thank you, that's exactly what we needed. So, generally speaking, the positive properties of the fiberglass insulation is that it does not burn. The negative is it can absorb water, kind of like a sponge. You get it wet and it will not dry. The water will go deeper and deeper into it and never come out. Also, compared to other forms of insulation, in the space that you're able to work with, that R value, the effective R value, goes way, way down. I was just going to use the table. I need that screwdriver from over there too, if you're just cleaning the table up. Yeah, that'll be an important piece. So the fiberglass that's in there, some folks will tell you it's already insulated, I'm not going to bother. Those people have it all wrong. You definitely do not want to rely on that little tuft of fiberglass. It doesn't even fill the space, right? If anything, it's helping with vibration dampening to make it a little quieter when you're going down the road, and will do basically nothing to improve or regulate the temperatures inside the bus. So that's about all I have to say about fiberglass insulation. Does anyone want to chime in?
Did you tell them it's itchy AF?
Oh yeah, fiberglass also, you get it on your hands and it'll get you itchy. If you get it in your eyes, you
Cold
may
water.
go blind.
Cold water stroke.
Yeah, it's very bad for your skin when you're working with fiberglass insulation. You want to have a mask on, you don't want to breathe the dust from it. It is not pleasant.
So yeah, when you're tearing out the original ceiling with that insulation in it, I recommend long sleeves, long pants, gloves.
Jumpsuit and boots.
Yeah.
And a face mask.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely a
And
face
something
mask.
to filter your air.
Yeah.
super hot out, it's worth it to protect yourselves from the grossness.
And goggles.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely goggles. Like, you want to be covered as much as possible when working with fiberglass insulation. You see the guys who do it professionally, and they're in full suits.
A good technique that I'm sure I didn't come up with it, but it worked great for me, is to have a shop fan at my back, working with a piece in front of me, so it just blew all the crap away from me
Right.
towards the rear, and then I could just sweep it all up and throw in a trash bag when I'm done.
Definitely helps.
We're gonna rank.
The rain's getting nice and loud. So on the next in this series, we will move on to the other popular meme insulation, which is in my market. Ryan's handed me. Everybody know what this is?
Can you hold that out better?
This is called Reflectix. And Reflectix is bubble wrap with a little bit of shiny foil on either side. It's a mylar foil, the same as what they make balloons out of that you can buy at the grocery store. If you read the label and you listen to some people on social media who don't know what they're talking about, this is the best insulation in the world. There's nothing that comes close to Reflectix when you're talking about its R value printed right on the label. It's like R8 or something for this, right? Now, they cheat when they come up with that R value. Reflectix is really good at exactly one thing, and that is reflective heat, like from the sun. If you have light coming in, you're going to reflect most of it, and this little bit of air that's stored in these little pockets in here will give you just a little bit of insulation before it gets to the next piece that's also going to reflect it back out. Outside of window shades and inserts you might use for your windows, this is basically useless. This provides almost no actual insulation value. If you have it on the skin of your bus and you're trying to keep the heat out from the sun, it'll be almost as if it wasn't there. And also, being semi-metallic, if you have high humidity and cool temperatures, you'll get condensation on your insulation, which is super fun. But let's look at one of the other neat things about Reflectix. I have a screwdriver. That didn't work. Do it like that. You're not too close to the hay.
I've got the fire extinguisher
Yep.
ready.
Here we have some Reflectix insulation. If you have any kind of fire issue in your bus, this stuff will burn pretty hot and it will drip. If you have this on your ceiling, it's going to drip onto your floor, onto your tables, onto your countertops. It becomes a fiery liquid. How long will this go?
The world may never know.
Right. I mean, the world's going to find out because I'm not going to put it out otherwise. But this is not what you want in the open air of your bus. It's almost done. Now let's go over the positives of Reflectix. It will conform to any shape because it's completely flexible, and you can even sometimes spray adhesive on it and it'll go nicely into a spot. And as long as everything goes great, you'll have a shiny surface that doesn't provide you any insulation at all. But,
Well,
nice.
how, is that bad to have in your windows then?
I use Reflectix only for windows, and only when we have something else behind it, or in front of it, I guess. So the Reflectix up against the glass, something else behind it.
Okay.
I don't have the perfect solution for Windows yet because my opinions on a lot of these things have changed since September when we had a fire in our bus. And so I learned some of these lessons the hard way. So I don't have what to do with your Windows figured out yet. Although so far I like Ryan's solution, but I haven't implemented it myself.
The one thing that I haven't done yet, but I plan on doing, is actually the ceramic tint. That actually does just as much reflective radiant heat out as your reflectors.
Yeah. Yeah, the ceramic coating is definitely an option. It is fairly expensive, especially when you're talking about you've got 14
If it is
windows on
higher
each
than
side
5%,
to do.
5 to 7%,
Yeah.
they do have a 5 or 7% tint that they do make that of the ceramic, the nano ceramic. They do have it.
Yeah, and that's
It is
great
available.
for the sun. That doesn't help you for it's 100 degrees outside.
Right.
Your windows are still going to be like your metal's going to be transmitting heat through the steel, and it's going to be radiating quite a bit in there. And traditional insulation tactics can help manage that. But your glass, like a closed window on a 100-degree day, is only slightly better than an open window on that day. The glass has absolutely no thermal properties. Using something like Reflectix or using something like the ceramic tint will help with the sun reflection and keep some of that heat from coming in. But the actual, it's 100 degrees outside, is going to go right through the glass.
And then do you know if it's affected by a lot of these people that put the Reflectix in a fabric and then use that as a screen cover?
The advantage you get from the Reflectix in that situation is the air gap of what's in the bubbles. You're not really getting any advantage from the foil on the sides because the fabric is already going to be stopping the light. Like it's going to end there, so it's not going to reflect off of the foil. You would be just as well in that situation with any other bubble wrap, which may be available at a lower cost. Or really any other kind of material pretty much you can put in there. There's nothing magical about air, but air will transmit heat more slowly than a lot of solid materials.
So possibly doing a fire retardant polyfill on your windows between your two curtain layers, like blackout polyfill, and that might be a better solution than.
I think the issue with the polyfill is going to be that it's a looser material, and so like it can lump up and become a little more difficult to work with. But if you've got a method for keeping it evenly
like
in place,
that's like when they make baby quilts, they have to be a fire retardant,
Right.
flame retardant thing. So, that batting is made to shape and lie flat. So, and it's made to be washed
Right.
again and again and again.
but I've
So
washed
it
blankets,
stays.
and after a little while, that material can bunch up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but how often you go wash your curtains?
Well, it's not so much that you're washing them, it's that they're always going to be vertical. So gravity's always going to be pulling it down, and you're going to be vibrating a lot. You've got a lot of movement happening there. I haven't tried that method, but I have met people who are using quilts or similar to do their window coverings.
You mentioned Ryan's solution for Windows. What is that?
Do you want to describe your curtain
Why
solution?
didn't you bring one? Where is it? Go back and get it.
Yeah, it's in his
In the
book.
rain.
I could unveil
Pouring down.
Yeah.
So I had seen somebody else come up with this, so I'm not the original person who found the idea. It was another bus lifer. I don't remember who it was at this point.
So now it's yours. Yeah.
So I did a heavy, like upholstery style fabric as the main curtain on the inside, but then there's also a thinner white curtain on the outside. And the layers are separated, so the logic is if you're in a spot where you want diffused light, but you want privacy, you can roll up my brown heavier duty curtain and have the sunlight diffuse in through the white fabric. Or you can roll them both up and have your clear view, and the added bonus of the two fabrics is they kind of capture that little bit of air gap between the two of them when they're down, and in colder weather or hotter weather, it helps keep the glass thermal bridging at bay a little bit better because there's that air capture between the window and the two layers of fabric.
Abish.
So we did, and when I say we, Ryan's mom and I, we did blackout curtain, mylar layer, and then a heavy duty fabric on the inside. And I have not had any condensation issues. Like this just almost cut it out entirely. But also, it the difference between rolling that curtain up or even having like just a one layer curtain, it's probably maybe 15 degrees. I mean, it's
Yeah.
significant. So,
Yeah, and that's one thing, like on our bus, we have curtains that go across to separate the driver's area from the living area, and it's just one layer, but it's a thermal curtain. So you get gaps, you know, we don't have them Velcro together or anything, they're not perfectly sealed up against the wall, but there's a clear and obvious immediate difference just from segmenting the front of the bus, where you have all of that, those huge glass windows up front, which I call the fishbowl. And like that's one of your biggest areas where you're going to lose your heat or air conditioning.
so with 2 layers, and this is my question, like drape sets are generally 2 layers. There's the thermal on the back, and then there's the cover on the front. Would it need to be fully encapsulated, or would those 2 layers as is stand as something adequate to be the thermal gap if we had, say, like a flexible curtain rod, you know,
I think you would
against
find
the windows?
if you had them perfectly sealed together into essentially a combined layer, it would be slightly better. That doesn't mean put 1,000 hours into getting that right, because it's going to be a marginal difference over just having the 2 layers there is what's making the big difference. A few little gaps where it's not perfect. Like it could be improved by doing that, I believe, but probably not by enough that it's worth putting much effort into it.
So would we lose efficacy if we quilted that? Like talking about the batting against the cross hatches about every.
I'm not an authority on quilting.
Yeah. At this point, it's so marginal. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. The fact is that bus windows are not intended to be insulated.
Right.
Things. So
Right.
if you want the best case scenario, get rid of your bus windows and put in double pane
I'm
RV
talking about the
windows.
windshield.
Yeah.
The other crap I don't care about. I know what I'm doing with those. But
Yeah.
that big windshield is new because I have like a whole wall that's fully insulated and a solid core door between my windshield and my house now, and I'm not gonna have that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how that's gonna work.
So like in my bus, I take pieces of Reflectix and shove it straight into the glass like you buy the reflective things for your car, and then I still have curtains that come down on top of that. So the Reflectix is doing the visible light, reflecting it back through the glass, and then the curtain is providing that air gap between the Reflectix and the curtain, and in most cases that's stopping a lot of the heat that would otherwise be penetrating through and creating greenhouse effect.
And you know what will improve that? If you put that layer of Reflectix on the outside of the windshield. That way you don't
That
get
is
that heat
true.
from the sun warming the glass up before it's reflected, and then on its way back out warming it a second time. Because that glass will get a temperature and it will start to radiate, and that'll give your second layer more work to do. But that's definitely like that's a harder to cover spot because it's huge, it's glass, it's not necessarily a square or rectangle. I found that the RV shops will have a suitable windshield reflective cover, which is what I use. And depending on how cold it is, I'll have it on the inside or on the outside, depending on what my cooling or heating needs are at the time.
Could you use like an SUV car cover?
Like a whole cover. I mean, if you find one big enough.
Cut it and,
Yeah.
cut it and fit it on the outside.
Yeah. I know Eric, if you guys know Eric, he's got a piece of it was made for chain link fences, and it's like a privacy layer that you put on it that's like a black fabric, and he puts some mounts so he can mount it on the outside of his windshield, and that seems to help him a lot, blocking just about all. It lets a small amount of light through, but it blocks the vast majority of it.
Because I've got 2 big windows on my bus. So I've got the rear and the front.
Right. Any other questions about Reflectix before we move on to the next one. All right, so other popular ones, we have, this is wool, this is Darren's wool that we stole from Darren. Do you remember the insulation properties of this wool? Is this Havelock or is this something else? Okay, so this is Havelock wool. This is pretty popular because you can kind of stuff it in. Darren will find out the actual insulating properties of it. This is an experiment I have not done before. All right. Sorry?
If you get smoke detectors, you
Yeah.
gotta go up in.
Yeah, so it did burn, but it went out when I removed the fire. That's a whole lot better than that reflective clothes, right?
Smells
Yeah, it
burnt
doesn't,
hair.
doesn't smell great.
No.
Yeah.
That's its feature. You wake up to the smell. Oh,
Yeah.
it's burning.
Who needs fire detectors or smoke detectors? All you need is stinky insulation.
Good old.
Our value of 3.6 per inch.
Per
so
inch.
2-inch bats are in our section.
Okay.
Is this in the school groups?
No. No, this is a wool, so this is like you can touch this and stick your finger in your eye. I don't, but you could. The fiberglass stuff is the stuff they put in the school buses.
Which is
Yeah.
similar to Lindsay.
Yeah. But I'm not gonna touch fiberglass stuff.
But on the
Oh,
school
there it is.
rebuilds, they're running string across their roof and putting that in.
For the wool.
Yeah, the wool, they're putting the wool in as the best thing ever. But then when they're drying the string across, they're shoving it up in there, but then when they dry, they go loose.
This is the stuff that comes in the school bus. It is fiberglass, it is not flammable.
No, but it was freaking annoying because it's up there and our AC was leaking in, so I'm pretty sure it's a lot molded.
Yeah, this will absorb your moisture and it will mold up. It'll be, you will get black mold in there if you don't address it.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna, that's what, I was trying to figure out what was in our ceiling, and I'm thinking because it's like white, where the speakers are at. I
Right.
didn't know, of course, it's like black and brown and where
Right.
the dirt got in, but it's like, what the heck is that? So, I've never seen it look like that, so.
And I was my bus,
Sample from
whenever I was taking our ceiling down, it actually was it was in bags. The coaches that I had, they were actually in bags on the ceiling, on the walls. It was weird, but it was fiberglass
Yeah.
still, and
Well, being in that, like, I don't know the specific product that you have, but generally speaking, it's not supposed to remain in the bag when it's deployed.
no, this is they were I don't know what it was for, but I mean it was designed for, but they were every panel was bagged. It was a bag. It wasn't just like it was a sealed bag that they were supposed to be in.
Okay.
So I don't know how that would work. But those are all out. But
Yeah. Well, that's definitely like the nicest way they could have installed it
yeah.
for you.
Yeah, so taking it out, it's just like take a bag and go to the trash.
All right. Well, can we move on to the next type of insulation, or do you have anything additional you'd like to add about the wool specifically? I don't have personal experience with it.
I mean, what I've read is it's a better management of moisture. Sheet wool will basically absorb moisture when necessary and release moisture.
Okay.
We have a lot less chance, we have natural, because of the natural fibers, it's less likely to break.
Good. So let me grab our next piece. Oh, my next piece is in my pocket.
There is another product out there. If you wanted to choose besides putting I know you've taken out the fiberglass, but there is rock wool.
Yeah.
If you've heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's pretty similar to fiberglass. I think it's a
lot
it's a
safer.
little less toxic to your skin and the rest of you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's pretty heavy though compared to.
It's not.
It's not.
Because I put it in my son's van. We were building his van out, and I used it because of it doesn't soak up moisture. It's literally spun rock. and it's actually, no mold will grow on it. So it actually did a really good job.
Yeah,
Well, it was in advance.
with that one, like the issue you run into is you don't have the space to get your full art value out of it. Because it's made to be installed in the wall or in the attic or something where you have that additional room for a 4-inch wall or even a 6-inch wall
Yeah.
or, you know, however deep your attic floor is, where you're expected to have all of this air gap in there, which is included in the art value. Right. Yeah, so the next type we're going to talk about is spray foam. And when you're talking about spray foam, there will be one joker in the room who says, "How about great stuff?" Like, who here has used great stuff?
I use it as a gap filler.
Yeah, like
My
great stuff
house.
is great stuff, right? It's expanding foam. You spray it, it fills the gap. You've now got a sealed thing. It's got some insulation factor to it, and it's great. And so I had some gaps and some cracks, etc., that I need to fill in my bus and use the great stuff. So this is 6 years old. Great stuff. I haven't done this experiment yet. Let's see what happens. Alright, so not as good as the wool when it comes to what happens when it gets lit. Yeah, pretty smelly. Yeah. Not as good as the wool, better than the XPS, I would say. I didn't get any drips of liquid fire under the ground, so that's nice. Smells bad, yeah. Yeah, so great stuff compared to normal spray foam insulation. Great stuff is very expensive. It doesn't end up with the same density that you would get from the professionally sprayed foam. It is easy to spray with a can, so for gap filling, etc., it's probably the best option out there. But when it comes to doing the 99% of your bus, first off, I wouldn't want that type of flammability if I could avoid it. But also, it'll be more expensive, it'll be more difficult to do, and not as good of insulation. So, just for gaps, really. Is this bucket able to just absorb waste?
That was my logic,
Yeah.
is if you had hot stuff, that
Yeah.
you didn't have anywhere else to put it.
I just don't want to touch it anymore. So, on that note, this is professionally sprayed insulation that is also about the same age as that great stuff. We'll put this in. The nice thing about all the spray foams is they will fill where you spray it. So you will have, if you have a big metal panel in your ceiling, it's going to cover all of the metal. You're not going to have those air gaps where moisture can form and build up. You're not going to have lost opportunity for more insulation. It's really good at filling the space. My opinion on spray foam is if you can find some professional outfit that will do it for you for a reasonable price, you should go that route, because it's not something that I think I would get right the first time, and you only get the first time. If you screw it up, you're screwed. If you pay somebody else to do it, they very likely have done it before. Prices, sorry.
Open or closed cell?
It's closed cell. Yeah, basically all spray foam is going to end up being closed cell. Open cell is like a sponge. Like literally, that's what a sponge is an open cell.
I've seen them in houses underneath, they used to call it cabling, and they had a couple of houses that it was completely underneath all the house.
So, where are we going with that? Spray foam insulation, its R value does not require an air gap. If you have 1 inch of spray foam, you get that 1 inch R value worth of insulation. If you have 1 5/8 inches, which is what you have between the outer ceiling skin and the edge of the ribs that go across, you got 1 5/8, that'll be about R10, give or take, for that space. It's about R6 or R6.5 per inch for spray foam insulation. You compare that to like Darren has for his wool. What do you say it was 3 or 3.5?
3.5
Per inch?
3.6 per inch for R7.
Yeah. So you can get almost double the insulation factor from spray foam as you would get from the wool. And once it is cured, which takes a couple of weeks after it's sprayed, as soon as they spray it, you have a very flammable space. But once it's cured, it goes way down. This is 6-year-old. And we did have a fire in our bus last September, and we have spray foam in the ceiling. We have a fair amount that looks this color now, but it did not burn our bus down. Are there any questions specifically about spray foam?
Do you need to make a way to spray the inside of your ribbing? Because that's a big space you're going to lose throughout it.
You cannot spray into a
Enclosed space?
enclosed
Okay.
gap. Yeah, because it needs the air to cure it. It needs also the room to expand.
Got it.
It's a little sketchy. Like if you take the sides underneath the window, the inside walls, so now you've got that gap underneath the window. Like that space is a little sketchy to spray in there, just because there's only one way out, and you need to do that kind of slowly, so it has some time to expand before you put more in there. But that's the way to do it. Like a professional, experienced person will know how to do that. But as far as actually getting into that rib, no, there's no good way to do that I'm aware of. What else do I have? Oh, I have some XPS foam here.
Kimberly,
So, the professional told us, like, from the wand, instead of the wand that goes like that, there's a little flexible tube, and you spray, and that's how you can get in there, and it delivers a small amount that will do that, and so, and that's how we did it,
Actually inside the ribs.
in the ribs, yes.
Okay.
So, but you have to have this little tube, it looks like refrigerator line, you
Yeah.
know, water line, it's a really small little tube, and you have to spray, and the nozzle's back here, and it's traveling through that tube, and you cannot stop
Yeah.
at all, or you have to get a new hose.
Yeah, right.
So
That's
I
how
think we did-
great stuff is. Like as soon as you
Yeah.
start spraying, you've used the whole can, whether you use it all or not.
Right, and
'cause
so
it'll
like, I
completely
think
clog up.
we went through about 20 or 30 feet of that little hose, but yeah, that, it actually worked that way,
So if you have an experienced installer who knows how to do that, that's great. My installer did not know how to do that, so
Yeah.
that space was skipped.
So what I've been told is that if you put spray foam inside here, it's going to do you practically no good because the heat's just going to transfer all the way around. And so,
I mean, that's the majority correct, but that air that's in there does contribute, and spray foam will resist heat more than the air will.
that's true.
But yeah, the reality is if your ribs are covered by something, that's more important than having another type of insulation inside the rib. All right, so we're moving on to XPS, which is extruded polystyrene, or styrene. This is very popular. It's available at Home Depot and Lowe's. One of them is pink, the other one is blue, depending on which store you've gone to. This has a pretty good R value for its thickness. I want to say it's R5 per inch, and it's pretty inexpensive. You can cut it. It's easier to work with than wood because you can cut it with a knife, but it's rigid enough that you're able to get it into places. You can kind of shove it into places and get a tight fit, things like that. And I still recommend this for floors because there's not a lot of good options for floors. and it's actually strong enough that if you use XPS, you can potentially put your flooring directly on top of it instead of needing to use a subfloor and save yourself 3/4 or 5/8 of an inch of headroom plus the materials, etc. Underneath the floor, the big positive there is it'll be starved for air. And so if you have a fire happen, it's going to be really hard for it to burn because air coming in isn't really going to be available for it. If you have it in your ceiling, where you're way more likely to have a fire that affects your ceiling than your floor because flames rise, it's a little bit of a different story. That one didn't even stay on. Ugh. Whew, that has a smell. So in my bus, when we had our fire, we had a good amount of XPS in our bus. And you can see how it's kind of turning into a little bit of soupy edge there where it's melting. And we found, and unfortunately I found, that it will drip like so and burns extremely hot. This is basically make your own napalm. I don't recommend it. Most of the damage that we got from the fire in our bus was caused by XPS foam. It has a very strong odor. It's very toxic. We should really have a fan running. You don't want to be in an enclosed space with burning XPS. Yeah, why don't we get a fan on or open the door a little bit? Yeah. I think Ryan's going to get the door, which will probably be plenty.
Much nicer feeling air.
Yeah. Is that helping?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a breeze.
Oh, yeah,
There's a
there we
good
go.
breeze.
I knew it would take just a second.
Yeah. Yeah, XPS is extremely popular for people who've never had a fire problem in their bus. I've gone from, I used to actually recommend it for walls and windows. I used it for window inserts, which is why I don't have a good solution for that currently. But I no longer recommend XPS above the floor because if you get into a situation where you have a fire problem, it's going to become the majority of your fire problem. This will be probably the most flammable thing that's not actually fuel that's in your bus.
What do fireballs have, like, can you speak to fireballs and how effective they would be?
Well, fire extinguishers in general are pretty effective against these. As long as you're there and you have a fire extinguisher and you remember where your fire extinguisher is, you know how to use it. The issue is going to be that XPS will cause the fire to grow in intensity extremely quickly. It's going to spread very quickly, and you're not going to be able to be inside the bus while this stuff is burning.
The exploding balls, can you speak to those, or are they only for electrical?
They're definitely not only for electrical.
No, but they'll only be useful where you mount them.
Mm-hmm.
So and they have a limited radius. So that's why I have one in my electrical bay, which is intended for that if something were to happen in there. But if I'm having a fire somewhere else in my bus, if either I'm not there or there's not a fireball mounted there, it's not going to do you any good.
Right, so what's the radius and how many do you need, and is that a reliable option?
The answer is it depends on the size you buy. I don't know off the top of my head. I think the big one's 6
I
foot
thought you
radius.
were the bus Bonanza genius.
Well, those those balls that you're talking about, those basically, you're gonna have those hanging in the center of your bus.
Yeah, like every 6 feet.
Every 6 feet. So they're gonna be hanging there waiting for them, and if those light up, it's gonna have to get to those by the time those get there.
Yeah, the
They're
fireballs are really best for enclosures.
Okay.
Is what they're designed for.
Engine bays, stuff like that.
And then having ABC rated fire extinguishers in other places around your bus is a better active solution.
Yeah. Yeah, like to put it in perspective, when we had the fire in our bus, the device that ignited was in the front of the bus on our engine cover, which you've seen where the engine cover is.
Right.
After the ignition, it was maybe 15 seconds between that and when Hillary and I were on our way out the emergency window in the bedroom. It was maybe 10 seconds later before I was back at the front of the bus pulling the thing that was exploding out of the bus, right? And then it took 10 minutes probably to put the rest of the fire out.
Were you driving?
No, I was asleep.
Oh.
I was fully asleep, and Hillary was sitting in the passenger seat with just our thermal curtain separating her from the thing that exploded.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So it went up and propelled her forward, basically. Like, instinct took over, and she can't run except for that one time.
Yeah.
Adrenaline. It'll.
But like the event was so fast.
Right.
Having something that's essentially fuel in there, this made it 50 times worse than it would have been otherwise. Like 95% of the damage in the bus was because of the XPS foam burning and the side effects of that. And that includes like a thick residue on everything in the bus. We've got char in a lot of places where fire didn't make it, just because of the intense heat that comes off of this stuff while it's burning. Like, it's super packed with energy. The military should use this on people we don't like. I tell people it's basically napalm.